everybody. It has been a lifetime, at least it has felt like. Both me, your host, I guess I started off grammatically incorrect. Both Joey
Yep.
and I, your host, Mason, are are back. We're in different digs this time, though
True.
this might be for one night only. Uh, we currently already have eyes on our old spot,
This is true.
but it is pretty much in similar situation. We spent about an hour and a half dealing with audio issues to get you this pristine listening experience.
Yep.
And then there was about a half an hour where we faffed about.
Yep.
And
It made tea.
made tea, and now we are here.
Now we have tea.
Now we have tea, and we're here. And what are we here doing today? Well, I'll tell you. Today, we are going to talk about Ecclesiastes. I almost said Ecclesians.
Ecclesiastes.
I
love Ecclesiastes.
I keep hearing it as Ephesians in my head, so I want to say, but I know it's Ecclesiastes, so I keep trying to say Ecclesians.
You'd be like, I love Lamentations.
I love I love the Bible.
I love the Bible.
I'm a true Christian.
The Christation.
Yeah, I'm a true Christation.
I love being a Christation. As God made me to be.
You know who the greatest Christation was?
Who?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Was that the one? I thought that was Picasso.
No, you're thinking of Michelangelo.
Ain't he a Dragon Ball Z character?
You're thinking of Goku. Anyway, but no, we're here to talk about Ecclesiastes. Now, if you have come here via the link from the overview of Ecclesiastes Instagram reel that I posted, which has definitely been posted as of recording.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
It has not.
We're lying.
Yeah. If you've come from that, well then, welcome. If you have no idea what we're talking about, and you're all of one person, that being PJ, who listened to this without seeing Instagram,
yep.
I encourage you to go and listen to the Instagram overview, because a lot of what I'll be referencing or talking about will come from there, as well as it's a nice overview if you don't have time to listen to the full podcast and want a quick 1 minute, very scripted, very tethered, edited experience.
Yep.
So, also that one has video, a video of yours truly. Well, I guess yours co-truly.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, enough messing about with the intro. Now we get to the actual fun part, and that is diving into Ecclesiastes. So, the big picture I want to paint you as going into this is Ecclesiastes is a very different type of book. It is a book of wisdom, which is not foreign to the Bible, but it is different from some of the other ones. It doesn't really have a whole lot of praise, nor does it have nor is it traditionally inspiring, I would say. It also is one of the few books that does not, it references God, but it does not ever use the divine Lord.
Yeah.
Which would be, it doesn't use the term Adonai, meaning Lord, but it also, of course, doesn't use his name,
right,
which would be abbreviated or changed to Lord. And so so already that marks it out as a very different type of book. And, coming where it does in between Proverbs and Songs of Solomon, already it's a very weird transition or liminal text, because it's going from Proverbs, which is this series of platitudes almost.
Yeah.
They're simple quotes. They're very easy. Everyone has probably heard the entirety of Proverbs in different pieces because it's that easy to compartmentalize.
Right.
And so it comes from that, a very easy to digest text, and then steps right in front of Songs of Solomon, which is, Songs of Solomon.
Right. Hey.
I want it to be that kids can also listen to this, so we won't go too much into that book.
That's on the Patreon.
Yeah, that's on the Patreon. But the Songs of Solomon, is it's a book of pleasure.
Yep.
So it's very much getting into that very romantic ideal of, physical satisfaction.
Yep.
While also tying it to a very spiritual level of satisfaction as well.
Right.
So, both of these books deal with things that are very much, I would say, easy to digest. You can read that and you can go, I learned something from that. I know exactly what I learned, and in most cases, I feel good.
Right.
Ecclesiastes is not that book.
Yeah.
You
No.
have read Ecclesiastes. I am willing to bet, as I say on the reel, that it is probably not very high on your reading list.
Yeah.
Though I would argue there are 3 books of the Bible that I believe that are, at least in my opinion, like they are books within you can ground your faith in, and are, if you only had access to 3 books of the Bible, those are the most important. And those, I would say, would be John, the Gospel of John,
Yep.
Romans,
Yep.
and Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
And I feel like they talk, I won't say that they tell the whole breadth of the human experience, but they definitely talk, they range so variously through not only Christian and Hebrew concepts, but also through human wise concepts, that I feel like they are probably, in my opinion, the highest when it comes to what books I am really going to encourage people to read.
Right.
And so now I've said a little bit of an overview of why I thought it was important to make that overview video, and why I feel like it's important to elaborate on stuff within this podcast. So now I'm going to turn over sort of the hosting style to Joey.
Yeah.
And I will let him drive.
So, one thing I kind of want to bring up is that we both go to a young adults group that I don't even, was it last year? Last year. We did a study on Ecclesiastes, and it was very, like he was talking about, it's kind of a hard read, in the especially the beginning part. Just because it starts out very like just straightforward, talking about using the Greek word like hevel, right, which means vapor,
Jewish word or Hebrew word,
vapor. That we were all kind of just talking about, and it connected very well, and so that's why I'm really excited to kind of talk about this and ask some questions, and just what you've kind of seen studying, and just kind of connected to some larger aspect of human existence as Christians, and just in life in general, but also in personal experience.
Yeah. And I have a book of notes and references because I was prepared for this because I thought of it. So I'm ready.
Yeah, I found out we were doing this 5 hours ago.
You found out we were doing this at 3:00 today.
Yep. Yeah. So if I'm a little behind,
All right.
someone else's fault.
Not mine.
That definitely not Mason's. So, what is kind of the with Ecclesiastes while you were reading it? First of all, what interested you in reading Ecclesiastes first? Like, what was?
So what's funny about that is I believe I was the one who suggested for the small group that we read Ecclesiastes, because I had actually, because these notes don't come from that week or so where we read it. These notes actually come from a previous reading I had done, and I was like, oh, I'd like to talk about these things there. And so so that was one of the things. I had read it before, and there were a few things that came in mind. For me, one of the harder parts of the expression of my faith is, of course, reading the Bible raw, just in its form. Like, I've read theology books, and I've read apologetics pages and things like that, but actually reading the Bible in its sort of untamed, just like its word, has been something that I admit I've faltered a little bit throughout my time as a Christian, as a Christ follower,
as we all do, honestly.
So I wanted to read a book. I wanted to read the Bible first and foremost. That was the first thing that was in my mind.
Right.
And then secondly, I didn't start at the Gospels just because I feel like at that point in time I was also going through a pretty rough season. And though I definitely believe the Gospels are always good, I needed something more than just the good news. I don't want to say more than. I needed something other than just the good
Right.
news. I needed something that spoke to where I was at right then and there. And right
Right.
then and there, I was not, oh, I need a good word on my salvation and the love of God for me. Right
Right.
then and there, I needed something that was like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm feeling really sucky right now. I'm
Yeah.
feeling like pretty much where I thought I was going to be
Mm-hmm.
in life was not where I was,
Mm-hmm.
which is a feeling I know for a fact many people uh, come to. And for me, it was more of a like I was exactly where I said I wanted to end up,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't happy there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was almost that sort of disconnect or of, oh, well, I had told everyone this is where I'm going to be. And I'd actually gotten exactly where I wanted before I thought I was going to get there. And, I
Mm-hmm.
was praising God. I was like, this was great. But then I just remember being like, it's one of those things where, when you tell people, like, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to do this. But in your heart, you really hope that this other thing occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
that was essentially where I was at. I, on the outside, I really wanted this look that I would really wanted this look because I always not prided I always pride myself on my ability to be very independent and very smart and be an aggressive go-getter
Right.
and I aggressively go got my job
Mm-hmm.
and my degree and all that. So the time I'm talking about, I'd gotten my degree,
Right.
I'd gotten my dream job, I had traveled the world a few times actually by this point,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, I've done, I'm doing the fun stuff in life that I wanted to do. But the secret thing, my secret shame, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
was that I had wanted to have a companion. I had wanted to have a partner,
Yeah.
and and I say secret shame just because it was something I never wanted to. I rarely admit that how much of a romantic I actually end up being. Like some of my favorite books are romance novels,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm a huge lover of the concept of love, of romance and all that. And so, and part of me, was hoping like, oh, no, outwardly I was telling everyone, oh, I don't care about that. I'm just trying to achieve my dreams and be happy.
Yeah.
But, that was definitely a hope that was also going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all hear the expression, if you're just following God and going down that path, look to your right, look to your left, who's over there,
Right.
that whole type of thing. And that did not work out at that point in my life. But I did get where I had always said, and I guess where I had planned to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very unhappy, but I didn't quite know why.
Mm-hmm.
Is sort of the context I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to read the Bible, and I had achieved what I said I had achieved my goals, but not my desires.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at a place where I was like, I've done all of this stuff and I'm not really happy. And so my thought was I need a book that kind of talks about that.
Yeah.
About not a book of, oh, I didn't do, like, I meant to do this and it failed and I need help with that, but a book that was like, well, even a book that essentially told you, like, even if you achieve what you set out to do, that's not always gonna fulfill you. And
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't read Ecclesiastes, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Well, so that boils down to the reason why I chose Ecclesiastes.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a book that was going to speak to my experiences. And when I heard of, I did what usually people do when they're like, oh, good Bible books to read when you're like this or feeling like this.
So you looked it up.
I did. I looked it up. I
Okay.
looked up that, and Ecclesiastes popped up.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let me read some passages there. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling this.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I really wanted to be intentional about it, that's I started taking notes. So I'd be at work and I'd be taking down notes of doing all of that.
Right.
And so it was so yeah, the reason I turned to Ecclesiastes was that fold. I wanted to intentionally read the Bible for once, just the Bible. And I wanted a book that spoke to my specific experience, and Ecclesiastes was that.
Right.
So that's the answer to that question.
Nice. Okay. So just for people, like, I feel like one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with sometimes is like, how to find what to read. And so I think it's really good that, like, you kind of talked about like it's okay to just be like, I'm just gonna like Google search best, best parts of the
Oh
Bible fill in
yeah.
blank. You know what I mean? Because I think people are like, oh, I should just know. It's like, dude, you don't always.
You
You know
don't
what
have to go on some like shamanistic journey.
I mean?
Like I knew what Bible book to read because in the heavens when I looked up into the sky, a coconut fell out, and when it bonked on the ground, it opened up, and inside of it was just one word, Malachi.
Malcolm.
And so
Amos.
that's why I read that book. Like you can absolutely go, well, I don't know that much about this book, and because there was another, I think I also read at that time, Jonah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read Jonah just because I was like I had never read Jonah, so I think Jonah was actually first, and so
Mhm.
I read through Jonah, and I was like, oh okay, this is
Mhm.
and I read that just because I knew the book of Jonah. I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna. So that was the first iteration of doing that. Was
Yeah.
I was gonna read a book I knew, so Jonah, because I had not read it
Yeah.
through, and I was like, okay, that was great. But that didn't really help me. And
Yeah.
so honestly, there really is no shame in going on, giving the old Google search and going, hey, um, you know, what's a book of the Bible for this experience? Whether you have Google or Bing, like some weirdos out there,
Yeah.
or DuckDuckGo
Our duck duck go
for our middle-aged Southern dads out there.
shout out to those people. We're not gonna say any names. PJ.
PJ. But but
um.
yeah, so no, there
Yeah.
actually is, absolutely is no shame in googling or trying or taking really mundane ways of
Right.
or which Bible verses you're gonna pick.
Right. Because no matter what, you're reading the Bible, which is the
Exactly.
important part.
Exactly, and the internet's out there, and I'm pretty sure God enjoys the fact that you're using the internet
Yeah.
to look up what Bible book to read as opposed to other things you could be
Yeah.
doing with the internet.
He's not gonna be like pissed because he's like, oh, so you use Google to find out how to connect with me? Oh my gosh, you know what I mean?
True people use lambskin.
Two people use GoDaddy.
Exactly.
Or was it DuckDuckGo or whatever?
GoDaddy. But I like that. Can somebody make that a web browser? I'll use that.
I'll make it Go Father.
Go Father.
Go Father of God.
It's for the Christians. Go Father.
Go Father. So awesome. So, what are some of the specific things that, like, in the book kind of stuck out to you? What was your, just while you're reading, was there anything that kind of stuck out to you that was like, this is impactful in my life, and kind of why was it impactful for you?
Yeah, well, so actually, in the first part of Ecclesiastes, by the first part I mean chapter 1, but I would also say part 2.
Right.
It really talks about the futility of wisdom,
Right.
and this is repeated a few times through the book. But wisdom. So again, this book comes right after Proverbs, which is a literal book about wisdom.
Right.
And Ecclesiastes is considered one of the books of wisdom. But even Ecclesiastes is just like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I think, and for me that was very big because I think I've said it, excuse me, before. I pride myself on my intellectual prowess and my ability to deal with, with life through a very analytical way. I may not be as wise as people like, let's say, Joey.
Yeah,
but
of course. Yeah.
I've always been able to figure things out just mentally. I've been able to talk my way out of things or think my way out of things. Very, I've prided myself on being very clever.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the things that I think was interesting was Ecclesiastes, because it talks about the fact that how, like, when it comes to things like death, what's the difference between a wise and a fool?
Right.
Or a wise man and a fool?
Right.
Absolutely nothing. They're both gonna die.
Yep.
It's one of the things that I think is really interesting is that this book, according to one commentary I read on it, Ecclesiastes takes a look at Ecclesiastes takes a look not essentially from an atheistic perspective, but from a very outside God view, outside the revelation perspective.
Right.
It's I'm trying to think of the exact wording he sort of used, but it was essentially that it tries to the character. I say the character because the character of the book is different from the author.
Mm-hmm.
So the author, the guy who wrote it, he has this character called the teacher.
Yes.
And that's actually what kind of the word Ecclesiastes kind of stems from, because it's essentially Greek for meaning like the assembly.
Yep.
So we can imagine this is a teacher talking to an assembly, and so the teacher that is described in this book, it's almost like he's describing events of him sort of trying to free himself from the revelation, or divine revelation of that. So he's going through all of these different ways to talk about, to give himself purpose and to find meaning in life.
Right.
And one of the ways he does this is through wisdom. He goes, okay, I will accumulate knowledge and I will accumulate wisdom. And and you think, okay, that's great, but what does that achieve?
But what's the point?
What is the point? Let's say you write a book or you do something and it changes the world. Well, number one, you're putting a really big amount of faith on the preservation of time.
Yep.
I mean, we have so many books, even written from people we know of history, and we only have like one page from those books. Right. I mean, the Bible, this is one of the miracles of the Bible, the fact that it's so well preserved.
Yeah.
But like other books, like the difference with the Bible is, kind of the difference with sort of other holy books is that people, there were entire dedicated communities of people who were dedicated to writing that down. Mm-hmm. But if you're just some, dude off the street who has like a Substack, like your whole thing goes down when one guy decides I'm deleting the servers.
Right.
I mean, it's just it. Like YouTube, imagine if YouTube just shut down. If they just decided, yeah, you know what? We don't care anymore. And everything deleted.
Right.
Like, yeah, maybe some people recorded them and put them on other websites or whatever, but you would be surprised how much media gets lost out there to history. There are entire pilots of shows and all of that are just lost in the files, and people never hear from them again. And these are as recent as like 10 years ago. Mm. There are probably some that are as recent as like yesterday that we just don't even think of. Mm-hmm. And so and so the thing is, trying to rely on the fact that my wisdom is going to provide meaning to, number one, to other people is a huge amount of faith, but to yourself even, how much good is your wisdom to you when you're dead?
Right.
Like, irregardless of if there's an afterlife, because and that's why I say the author, or not the author, but the teacher in this book, is not necessarily atheistic. He's not antagonistic towards God, and he's not atheistic, stating that, oh, there is no God. He's just, one could say he's almost secularistic, in that it just, like, right now, he's focusing on, like, or at least he's focusing on his life as a very pragmatic, like, just life without all the spiritual stuff. Right. How does this work? Kind of separating himself from that. And one of the things you find with just that worldview is that irregardless of whether there's an afterlife or whatever, if you die, your knowledge is nothing. It's not worth a single thing. Not especially not to you.
Right.
And so, but let's forget even about death. Let's say that, it's the attainment of knowledge itself gives its purpose. When you're dead, you don't need that purpose because you're dead for whatever happens. But at least when you're alive, maybe that attainment of knowledge, that gives you something to look forward to. But the thing is, to me, it seems almost Sisyphusian because it's pretty much never ending.
Right.
You're consistently just chasing after this thing that cannot be fulfilled. I'm a historian by profession. And one of the things you learn as a historian is how much we don't know as historians. Mm-hmm. I mean, practically everything we know is made from inference, right. Or induction. We have to go, well, these are the facts we're given, and this makes the most sense than other things. Yeah. So we're going to say that this is what happened. But how many times do we hear that? Oh, this piece of writing came up, and now everything is thrown up in the air.
Right. Now everything's trash. Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. There are so many things we can't trust because how many sources, with not to get too political, but a crazy, this is post, the big, craziest, or most influential Trump rally that just occurred.
Right.
Um, and there's so many stories that have come out of that
Right.
already, and
Right.
people were there.
Yeah.
People saw that. These people are still alive,
Yeah.
and they are all telling us. Some people even caught stuff on film, and I've heard 50 different theories
Right.
about what occurred. And so, you know, you start asking yourself, does the attainment of knowledge become my purpose? Does that define me? Because if that's true, I will never stop. I will be running forever. And for
Mm.
some people that might be, that might be all the fulfillment they need. But to me, I'm just like, what type of goal is that? If the
Mm.
goalpost keeps moving, I'm just consistently running. You
Mm.
get close and then, oh, it's still going. And for some people, maybe they're like, okay, well, I just need that motivation to keep going.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think for a lot of people, we tend to just try to limit our view to that, because we're like, well, because for a lot of people, they'll go, well, if I think about the big fact that there is no end goal with that, I'll lose my mind.
Yeah.
So maybe if I just focus on the next few steps and don't even think about that, I'll have some illusion of progression. But the
Right.
truth is, it's a chase of the wind. You are
Right.
chasing the wind. You are chasing this thing that is always moving forward. And if you're like me, eventually you're just like, why? What even is the point? I
Right.
can never reach this goal, and so why do I keep going? And I
Mm.
reached this conclusion, as did the teacher within
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes. He was like, I tried to go for all this wisdom and do all of this stuff, and in the end, it was hell. It was
Yeah.
futile. It was useless. It was meaningless. It was vapor. It was whatever. He tried, and he realized that it there was no fulfillment, because
Yeah.
he never finished. You could never stop.
Right.
And so that I would say, that kind of equalization of even something like wisdom
Mm.
was really stood out. Also, the fact that wisdom, as I said before, is seen as a very important sort of you know personal currency in the Bible,
Mm.
of spiritual currency even. How many times do we talk about the importance of being wise?
Mm.
And it's important to note that Ecclesiastes never says that wisdom is unimportant or not good.
Right.
It just says, though, that it's not in and of itself fulfilling.
Right.
You can almost think like vapor.
Yeah.
Vapor isn't bad.
Yeah.
It's
It
not
can even be beautiful.
exactly. And water is good. Water's good. Vapor, that humidity, that water there, it moisturizes. It it can keep things living.
Right.
So that can be very good. Vapor can be very good. The problem, though, is that vapor is not fulfilling.
Right.
Having vapor on its own, like just having vapor with you, will be good.
Right.
Having vapor on its own, you'll still die of thirst.
Well, also trying to capture it.
Exactly. And trying to capture it, you'll never capture it.
Yeah.
It'll never fill you. You'll die of thirst anyway, if you just rely on that of its own.
Yeah.
Relying on wisdom for wisdom's own sake, though, can be good. If that's the only thing you're basing yourself on, then you will end up wasting away.
Right.
And so that's what I think was one of, at least for me, the most profound things I read out of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, I think in a similar but different way, I am a person that it kind of came into my life at a kind of a perfect time as well, because you and I think have had the same same intention and reasoning, but different trajectory, I think. Like Mason and I always talk about how we are both very similar but also very not.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I think our wisdom that we were searching for were different. So yours was a lot more what would be the word you'd say, like through schooling and degrees. Academic, yeah. For me, it was more which I did have that as well, but it was very much so I wanted to be a therapist, and I wanted to be I loved psychology, and I still love psychology.
Big purpose behind it.
Yeah. And so I was I'm going to, uh, you know, there was a certain age where I went to therapy and started to figure out certain things, and there was an idea that if I could just understand enough about therapy or understand just enough about the human brain or whatever, I could fix every problem that I would have. I would have enough wisdom to fix the problem or whatever it is. And so it was years and years of just trying to learn the next thing, the next plan to just figure out your life and fix it and whatever. But as I and one of the things that Ecclesiastes talks about is the gaining of wisdom brings sorrow.
Oh yeah.
Which also calls back to like Adam and Eve with the garden. You know what I mean? It was the knowledge of good and evil that was brought upon them, and then they dealt with shame and because they were naked and all these things. And I think as I looked for wisdom in like, okay, how to deal with everything and how to be the wisest on this and that and the third, and I started to look at the world and see it, and just as you mature as well, because that just comes with maturity, you start to look at it and go, oh my gosh, this is so much more than I could ever handle. Like, I cannot deal with this by myself, and it's saddening. And you look at things and go, I mean, obviously I can pray about it and I can bring it before God, but like me as just a person, I cannot, even as a Christ follower, I cannot fix every problem in the world, because that's not my goal. You know what I mean? That can't be my goal, because I will always fail at that, you know? And so I think it was like a similar but different thing for me, was just like reading this. It kind of gave me a peace in being like, first of all, heard, of relatability, because I feel like a lot of times, though the Bible is a lot more honest emotionally than I think even Christians and some pastors give it credit for. Like we talked about, a lot of people don't even know about Jesus crying or getting angry, or the context of that and where it came from. And
though, if you live in a or if you've gone to a Black Baptist church, then you've definitely heard Jesus wept.
mm,
So that is a very classic old black lady saying.
oh really?
And Jesus wept.
And Jesus
That
wept.
and the devil is a lie.
I know that one for sure.
The devil is a lie and Jesus wept.
And Jesus wept.
So, so we definitely heard it.
Next podcast is going to be at a black church.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, for as a person, I that just goes through like, everyone goes through seasons of depression and stuff like that. And as a person that I feel like I explain oftentimes my relationship with Christ is very somber, because God found me in a dark time in my life, and he has taught me and loved me and helped me learn to love myself and all these things. But also the darkness still exists. Like, you still live in a sinful world, and you will still always, while you're on the earth, even with the presence of Christ in your life, you will deal with the difficulties, and everything that you try to grab a hold of here is, like it says in Ecclesiastes, it's vapor. It's some of it's good, some of it's bad, but like trying to grab a hold of it either way and take it with you when you go is a worthless effort to try to build enough here to where you could take it on with you as you go. So I thought that was really interesting.
And so as we wind down to the conclusion of this, I would like to tell a little bit about why, at least in my opinion, why it seems so pessimistic. And the reason why I believe that it seems so pessimistic is because the book right now, you've had two other books that are surrounding it. Not saying that Ecclesiastes was written in tangent with them. Most people would argue that Ecclesiastes was written some like a while after Proverbs and Psalms, by a descendant of David, if not Solomon himself, then somebody who was using Solomon almost as as a character, as the teacher,
Yeah.
to say that. And so we know it was later than Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, but
Mm-hmm.
the reason for it is, but you can imagine that around this time, Ecclesiastes is being written and made for an audience who has had a number of different biblical, almost affirmative texts and
Right.
affirmative wisdom texts. We can imagine. I mean, today we're inundated with all the devotions about strength and
Mm-hmm.
happiness and joy and all that,
Yeah.
and the wisdom in these things. Not saying that any of those things are wrong,
Yeah.
but just there are so many. So the purpose of Ecclesiastes, in being almost so depressing,
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that it helps us. It acts as it acts as almost the contrast that you
Yeah.
need. It says, hey, it says, okay, if you remain unconvinced by the by the attributes and the qualities of a life with God, then let me tell you what it looks like, at least from a personal anecdote of a life lived without him.
Yeah.
And that's pessimistic. It's pessimistic because it's trying to get you to understand this fulfillment that you are looking for within the world and within material things, or even immaterial things that are tied to a finite space, like again wisdom, knowledge, and pleasure. These things are not going to solve any of your hunger for purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why, and it has to be grim.
Yep.
Because it's really trying to get to that point. It's almost like it's almost like that pastor who has done all of these very happy, all these very joyous, praiseworthy sermons for years, and and he's not seeing a real change up in the church or whatever. So then he comes out one day and he goes, let me tell you a story about my life before I came to Christ.
Yeah.
And it is an absolute ride.
Yeah.
Like, that's what this is. It's going, okay, well, just in case you don't believe, or you're currently like this and you're thinking, oh, you know what, doesn't matter, I can make my own meaning or my own purpose. Let me
Right.
show you the logical conclusion of that.
Yeah.
And it does that. I'm not going to go through the full thing just because, again, it's up on the reels, but it does that, and that's the purpose of it. But it does have an amazing implication. The amazing implication is that every single one of those crises, you could say, those existential crises that occur, is solved by God. That is the implication of all of this, that God solves that. And he solves it through a few ways. Number one, his consistency. And I mean that not just as his faithfulness, but also as the fact that he is eternal.
Yeah.
So he's consistently there. And so there's that very big role that plays. So trusting in him is not only trusting in him to to help you, but also trusting in the fact that he will remain there.
Right.
And and so that's one of the that's one of the big selling points of that. There's also, of course, looking for purpose. What's better purpose than that put into eternity?
Right.
There's a reason why we're called to acts of service, because being wisdom or using wisdom by virtue of fear of the Lord and is eternal wisdom. It's meaningful or it's wise because it's inherently meaningful. That's why it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, because that is the moment when you fear the Lord that you actually you're wise up to the fact that, oh, everything matters because he does.
Right.
Nothing matters without him as the anchor. It's essentially what Ecclesiastes is saying. But once you add God into that equation, then everything does. Intention starts having real intent. There's a reason why I woke up today. I may not know the reason yet, but I know that if I woke up today, there was intent behind it. Right. So I know that I got to make this day a good day, and I got to find, and if you want, you can try to find that intent, or you can trust that God will lead it to you, whichever. But the basis of knowing that it wasn't a meaningless, just, oh, I'm awake now, I guess I'll dribble out of bed, is very important. And I really do think that is what a lot of Christians who may not have read through the whole of Ecclesiastes, or may not see it in its proper context, miss. There's a reason I believe that so many Bibles and canons and all that put it between Proverbs and the Songs of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons is because most people think that it was written by Solomon,
Right.
so it seems pretty easy.
Right.
But another, I think, is, or at least a virtue of its placement there, is the fact that it is perfectly sandwiched between one book that is telling you good platitudes to live by and another book which is telling you how to seek pleasure spiritually. And right in the middle is a book that reminds you that, hey, the two things adjacent to me right now, these things only matter when God matters in your life. These things will
Right.
only matter in your life when God matters in your life. You can chase, and you might even succeed in having both of these things: a
Mm-hmm.
wise, pathed out life,
Mm-hmm.
or a pleasurable, wonderful life.
Yeah.
But you won't actually appreciate that if you don't understand
Yeah.
what it looks like without that. Because again, there are a lot of people who have lived, the type of life where they get a lot of pleasure.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who have lived a life where they've spent all this time meditating, and they have really good answers to some of the big problems.
Yeah.
But these people also have the side effect of not have being happy.
Yeah.
Yes, some of them have been. Some of them
Enjoying.
have been. I'm not going to say that there haven't been people who didn't have God in their lives and weren't happy,
Mm-hmm.
because I definitely believe there were people like that. But we also know that that's not. There were other things in their life that made them happy. It wasn't pleasure and that did, because there's so many people who just seek out those stuff, and they get faced with the grim reality that, if you're seeking a life of pleasure, of constant parties on the weekend, well, Monday always comes.
Yeah.
And if you're seeking a life of meditation and all that, well, a lot of times it's a very solitary time.
Right.
And so, and if you're willing to, and sometimes their answers to these is, well, you got to give up something.
Mm-hmm.
But in Ecclesiastes, the thing you got to give up is is all of those things.
Yeah.
And you gain God, and then you gain them all. But now you gain them all intentionally with full purpose.
Right.
Do you have any closing remarks?
I think the one thing I would definitely say is, I think for the generation that is coming, that is here now and coming up, especially with, I won't go into detail obviously, but just the general climate of the world, but like the political climate in all different places, not just America, but like there are so many people that are our age and older and younger, but especially the kids that have grown up with like the internet, and they constantly see the darkness of the world. They see good, but they also see the darkness of the world all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it has been almost catapulted, and that's why we see a lot of kids with depression and anxiety and all these things, and we see a growth of that. And I think that's why, like, it went so far with our young adults group and with both of us individually, and because it opens your eyes. First of all, it comforts you in the fact that, like, even as a Christian, this is not just, you're not being crazy. Yeah. Like, this is actually a difficult world to be in and all these things. So it gives you comfort in that, but also just in the fact that, like, it's a good reminder of, like, without God, what is the purpose of getting all of these things? What's the purpose of wisdom? What's the purpose of even the things that maybe they're not immoral, they're amoral, they could be good or bad, but what's the point of them without a purpose, given to you? And so I just would suggest it. Read Ecclesiastes. Take time, read through it and pray through it, and see what you can gain from it. I think that's the main thing that I have to say.
Or don't, and be a chump.
Yeah, be a loser.
Those are really your two options.
Or if you can't read, sorry.
Yeah, listen to an audiobook. It's 2024.
That's true. Literally, there's no excuse.
Yeah, you've got no excuse. You can be a loser, or you can read Ecclesiastes and be cool, like us.
Like us, yeah.
All right, yeah. But anyway, well, thank you for joining us on our new sort of format. This is going to be the new format of how we do things. I know we only had like 3 episodes before this.
Great episodes.
They are great episodes. I might offload them.
Yeah.
Just so people don't get confused with the new format.
True.
But if you have enjoyed this, then leave a like or whatever the heck they do on Spotify. I don't really
save an ad. Favorite.
Yeah, do a save an ad.
Heart.
Favorite us. Heart
Share.
us. You know, or you know what? If you know us, text us and be like, we really like that.
Send us a heart.
Exactly.
Send us a fish emoji.
Send us a fish emoji, so we
Then
know.
we'll know.
So we know. And but also leave. I don't think you can do this on Spotify, but like I said, this will be also there will be an an overview of Ecclesiastes done by me on the Instagram. You know, if you have any questions about things that were said here in that video, you know, write them there in the comments. Also, if you would like to, if there's any topic, and I mean any topic, whether it ranges from biblical to theological to philosophical to historical to literary,
Cultural.
you know, cultural, I guess would be one,
Yeah.
but I really wanted to say literary.
That as well.
Cultural and literary.
Both.
Then again, write it down there, and I will try to do some research on it. A video, you know, if I'm like, oh, there's so much to do there, then we'll do a overview video of that as well, and we'll probably also do an accompanying podcast to make sure to explain it, elaborate it, go over some points I would have liked to touch on in the video that I didn't. But for the time being, this has been Mason and
Joey
on the BroTies. Thank you, and out.
See you. Hello, Daddy Pim. Hello, Daddy.